we don't expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you are.
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm John Dickerson. For 7 polite hours yesterday, the president and congressional leaders sat in Blair House and discussed health care reform. A day later, it's not clear whether they gave the issue new life or simply talked it to death. To figure out which of the two it is, I'm joined by CBS News political analyst Marc Ambinder, who's on the lawn of the White House, which is almost as windy as it was yesterday in Blair House. Marc, what's the White House view of how it went yesterday?
I think the White House thinks it was an acceptable day. At this point, they feel as if they've twisted enough arms to provide full employment for massage therapists for years and years and years. They've chewed enough ears to provide full employment for plastic surgeons. And now it's up to Congress. The White House has done its best to set the agenda, and there's not much more they can do. The president, over the next few days, I'm told, will be consulting widely. What that means, he's going to be checking to see if there are enough votes for the health care bill that he wants. If not, they're probably going to move on.
Before we get to the strategy on the Hill, there was, going into the meeting, even the president, but also his aides were talking about how he was going to draw some bright lines. He was going to say to Republicans, look, what's your plan? He did a little of that, but he also seemed to bend over backwards to try to sort of meet them halfway and be the president of his campaign. There was not that much heat he put on Republicans. Why do you think he did that?
I think two reasons. One is that Republicans showed up prepared to challenge him. And I think another reason was that his efforts to draw bright lines were muted somewhat by the fact that he had to share the stage with other Democratic colleagues who had concerns of their own and who were drawn into debates over processes. And let me add a third reason, I think, which is that, look, this president is simply not the type of president to hammer, to put his fist down on a table and say this is the way it's going to be. And politically, I think the White House has calculated that for House Democrats in particular, and I know this gets into congressional strategy, but it answers your question in a way. I mean, they need to give House Democrats some cover for this health care vote. And the way they do that is by portraying the president and Democrats as doing everything they possibly can to be bipartisan. And so I think that's one reason for the mixed messages that you saw.
Right. So the president can say, I did everything I could, Republicans weren't with us, and so we moved ahead on our own. So let's talk about the moving ahead on our own. Just game it out for me in the House and Senate, how this goes forward now.
Well, in the House, Speaker Pelosi, for a variety of reasons, needs, depending on what your count is, 4 or 5 extra votes coming principally from Democrats, because the one Republican, on Joseph Cow of Louisiana, who voted for the bill, has said he's not going to vote for the second round. So she needs 5 votes to pass the Senate bill as is. And this is the Senate bill with the corn husker kickback that John McCain talked about yesterday to great effect. This is, of course, the money, Medicaid money that went to Nebraska. And is also the same bill that has the breaks for Florida seniors that McCain was complaining about. This is the bill that no one likes, the bill that contributed to Scott Brown's victory in Massachusetts.
No one likes, including the president, who agreed with McCain on the carve-out for Florida. Who agreed with the president,
which sort of undercuts the push to have the House pass the bill. That doesn't happen, then the Senate will take essentially their bill, add to it what the president has proposed, which makes it reconciliation friendly. And try to pass what they can with 50 votes, and then goes back to the House to see if that bill is more palatable. And, in theory, this could be done in a day. House Democrats could vote for the Senate bill, and that would be that, and they could fix it later. In reality, the politics just aren't there, haven't been there, and nothing the White House has done or really can do has changed that. So I think we're talking about a couple of weeks of back and forth, some ping pong here to see, again, first if the bad Senate bill can be passed in the House. Doubtful. Then we go to the Obama bill, which the Senate will try, and then it'll be kicked back to the House. And if that doesn't happen, I have a feeling what you'll see is what everyone is now calling Plan B, which is not, in terms of health care, which has a different connotation for other reasons, but which will probably wind up being some sort of a combination of an increase in Medicaid and some coverage for children and families, and maybe a few insurance restrictions, but a much watered down bill than what they want.
Quickly on let's sticking with Plan A for a moment. In order for Plan A to work, to pick up the number of House members that Pelosi needs, or to get the votes that Reid needs in the Senate, they're going to have to twist arms and make deals and do the kind of stuff that was supposedly a problem with the last round or the previous several rounds of health care reform, which is those behind-the-scenes backroom deals. So how do you make the deals on this new bill without doing the stuff that supposedly got everybody unhappy with it in the first place?
You don't, which is why the House is not going to pass the bill, most likely.
Now let's, on Plan B, if there is a Plan B out there, why isn't everybody sort of, whenever there's a Plan B, everybody kind of immediately moves to that, and in this case, if the president really wants to fight for what he put together, his melding of the House and Senate bill, doesn't he have to get in there and say, let's not go to Plan B yet, let's really stick to Plan A? Doesn't he have to play a role again, other than just hosting the 7-hour marathon yesterday?
You know, it's unclear. Again, I think this is what the White House means when they say the president is consulting. He's really trying to see whether his plan has any chance of real success. Again, it's difficult to tell. You can certainly tell that Democrats in the Senate are extraordinarily eager to try the reconciliation option, hoping that that'll give this whole thing some momentum. I mean, Dick Durbin, in the middle of this summit, which was all about allegedly trying to find a bipartisan compromise, went out to cameras and essentially said, you know, we're moving forward with this in a very rapid way, which was, of course, a metaphor for the reconciliation process. But it's not easy. I mean, the answer for the White House, John, is that there really isn't an answer, and at some point the White House may prepare or may have to just take a defeat on this one and move on. I think at the very least they can say with yesterday's summit they tried.
Okay, thanks very much, Marc, from the White House lawn. And now we turn to Wyatt Andrews, who's been investigating the mistreatment of veterans for a special evening news piece. He has the shocking story behind disabled veterans being denied benefits, and he joins us now. Wyatt, what'd you find?
John, thanks. We found this is a program that a lot of veterans call VOC Rehab. It has other technical names. But it sits out, these are benefits that sit outside the GI Bill and are designed to give disabled veterans, only disabled veterans, whatever kind of training they need to either go off to independent living, even assisted living perhaps, nursing home, or any kind of job training they need to return to the workforce. After 8 years of war, there's more than 100,000 of these veterans in the system, but it's spiking upward year after year, obviously, as the casualties of war increase. What we found, though, is an extremely spotty system that too often denies these veterans this welcome home, if you will, this return to the workforce benefits that they're entitled to. I'll give you just some examples, some of whom will appear. I think all of these will appear in our story tonight. An Army veteran in a wheelchair, for example, who's told by his VA counselor, he's got a severed spinal cord, told by his VA counselor he doesn't qualify for the program. He should. A Marine with PTSD, who, now that's not an obvious injury, but it is a real disability, who's told by his VA counselor the VA doesn't help veterans study pre-law. They do. This man is qualified. The VA, in fact, is moving to rectify the situation for this Marine. Another Marine leaving Walter Reed, who was told finally, after 5 months of bureaucratic infighting, contract problems, all of that, finally told he would get his vocational benefits to study at Gettysburg College, and on the first day of class the VA calls to take it back. And so what we're finding at bottom is an extremely spotty, unevenly managed program that helps the preponderance of veterans who apply, but too often fails in a program that should be as fail-safe as possible.
Why, what's going on here? Is it just bureaucratic mix-ups and screw-ups, or is it budget problems that are crunching down and making this program where people are making decisions based on numbers? What's causing this?
It's all of that is involved, John. But what we found, and I have to say, there is a uniform opinion among the dozens and dozens of people that we talk to about this one fact. VOC Rehab capably serves tens of thousands of veterans and returns them to the workforce or to a home every year. Okay, that's a fact, and we have to give the VA its due. That said, everybody that we contacted, even those who hated the VA, said that the problem is the counselor. It's right there. Some of these counselors are excellent and get the job done for these veterans, and some counselors are mean-spirited or don't care, or are outside counselors, and there's a contracted counselors, and there's a problem in the communication between the VA and the outside contractor. One quick example: we found a former Army lieutenant, an officer, who goes in to talk. He's black. He goes in and talks to a white counselor, and the white counselor dismisses out of hand his application to go to flight school. Believe it or not, some veterans, disabled veterans, actually qualify to go to flight school. The system should cover it if they qualify. But the counselor says, I'm not going to help you go to flight school, but if you want to, you can take your case to Oprah. That kind of stuff.
Well, and these are just mean people, or is there any kind of systemic pressure on them that's got, somebody looking from above saying, hey, don't dole out a lot of these benefits because it's going to get me in trouble, or do they just happen to find counselors from a bad group of people?
Once again, all of the above. Again, we can't take away from the excellent counselors who get it done. For example, in the San Diego area, just to name one, we were told by several people, you're not going to find much, there are contracting problems out here, but the VA counselors here are great. With respect to the counselors who are less than adequate, I don't know why that's tolerated. I don't know why it's not rooted out. And the counselor in question here, the VA, says, okay, admitted to us that this happened, but they denied the context came in the mean way that the veteran interpreted it as. I should tell you, this veteran, he's an Army officer. He knew enough to complain to his congressman, Mike Ross, in Little Rock, who immediately investigated, and the VA changed gears in about 20 seconds.
Well, that's the next question, which is what's going to happen now in terms of trying to fix these problems?
I think it's going to take a lot more congressional oversight than what we've seen so far. Every year the VA goes to these congressional committees, or either there or in paperwork says that it's achieving a success rate of 75 to 74% up in that area, which as rehabilitation goes is pretty good, because these are disabled veterans. They have family problems, they have medical problems. You're not going to get to 100%, and that's not expected. On the other hand, there's been controversies for more than 8 years over exactly how the VA counts its success rate. Sometimes it hasn't even included those veterans who come to the table, get into the program, and drop out. And it doesn't count the kind of veterans that we met who came to a VA counselor and were dismissed out of hand, were eligible, but never even entered the system.
So there's no metrics, there's no spreadsheet that says here are the number of people come in and here are the number of people we can help in these various different ways.
The problem that I just talked about, where they used to not count the veterans who applied but dropped out, they have fixed that. And congressional oversight, inspectors general, GAO, everybody has said, yeah, you know what, that's fair. If a veteran drops out for medical reasons, you can't blame that on the VA. So that part of the VA's complaint is valid. However, they did admit to us in the course of this investigation and reporting that they still don't count the people who walk in and are summarily turned down.
And so by tracking it, presumably they can find the counselors who are turning people down too much and then go figure out what the problem is with them, maybe.
One would hope.
One would hope. Okay. Wyatt Andrews, thanks very much.
John.
And thank you all for watching Washington Unplugged. I'm John Dickerson. Have a good weekend.
If we don't expand our imagination,
Justification for being what you are.